Raab yesterday, Adam Fleming in Brussels. Thank you very much. Nadhim Zahawi, do you agree with what Dominic Raab said in that clip we just heard, that while no deal is not the optimum result, it would have certain advantages?
Well, we looked at this on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, i.e. this specific question, i.e. what would happen if there is no deal? And yes, it will be very, very difficult for the UK economy, but it'll be equally difficult for the EU27. Remember, we inject about 60, 70 billion pounds a year of demand into the EU27. So it's in nobody's interest. But as someone who came out of the sort of private sector into politics, you can't go into any negotiation not being able to walk away. If you can't walk away from a deal, you will always do a bad deal.
So it's just a tactic then? It's not actually a really substantial option? No,
but the issue here is we have put our position forward very reasonably. We think we've made sufficient progress, which I think the Prime Minister will say, on money. We've said we'll pay all the way through our obligations for the current budget of the EU, that in the implementation phase we'll pay our dues. On EU citizens and British citizens, we've said that, here is how it would work. We can take this off the table quickly.
But
they want the ECJ to have the final say on EU citizens.
But despite that, Nadhim Zahawi, they're saying the ball is back in the UK's court. So I say to you again, what are the advantages of a no deal?
Well, there are no advantages of a no deal. It's a bad deal to have no deal on both sides. But not being able to walk away, if they are so unreasonable that they can't see that we've made sufficient progress. So let's take Ireland, for example, and Northern Ireland. Unless you begin to talk about the trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of Europe, you can't really come up with a final deal on Northern Ireland's status. So we need to move on now.
So what point do you say we're walking away? If there is no more progress, and at the moment there hasn't been, and in fact today the EU has just said the ball is back in your court. So at Christmas, which is when the former leader Ian Duncan Smith has said that should be the next deadline, if the talks haven't moved on, should the UK leave without a deal?
Well, first of all, we've just heard from your correspondent there that there's lots of detail being worked through. There's lots of work that is some progress being made. So I'd like to think we keep going. We work hard to get a good deal for both sides. I'm confident we'll get there. But I go back and say to you, if you can't walk away from a deal, you'll always do a bad deal.
Right.
So we've got to make plans that if we have to walk away, we can.
Right. Do you agree with that you have to have that as an option? Otherwise, people don't think you're serious about walking away?
I think it's a tactics. I think it's part of the sort of mood music around this. I think for, Nadhim said, it would be terrible to go away without any deal because it has an impact on us and it has an impact on our friends in the European Union. I think that Theresa May's speech in Florence indicated a change from some of the talk we had a year ago, from leavers saying we should just walk away and some Remainers saying we're just going off a cliff edge. There will be a deal. There will be a deal. And the question is what sort of deal that's going to be. So let's just get on with that. I would have to say, Joe, one of the things that David Cameron made a mistake on, though, was that in calling for a referendum, he did not prepare Whitehall for a leave vote.
Right.
And as a result, that left us in disarray when he walked away.
And on that, how much planning is actually going on at the moment for that no-deal option? If you say it has to be a realistic option, even if you don't like the prospect of it, how much real planning is going on?
You've clearly heard from Dominic Raab and others that every department is making plans for the worst option, which is a no deal. That's not where we want to be.
No.
So that planning, rightly so, is being made.
What about infrastructure? I mean, should the ports now be looking at capacity if there are going to be potentially hold-ups, even for a short time, if there's a no-deal option of lorries, trucks transporting across to the continent?
My advice would be you work very hard to get a deal, and I
understand that, but should there be moves towards building infrastructure in case there isn't a deal?
You have to make contingency plans, and that's what the departments are doing. But the energy should be going into actually getting a deal in place in the next 6 months that allows business, UK business, to be able to plan forward. That's why Theresa's gone forward with the implementation period. That's a very important thing that she's talked about. Implementation, this isn't a sort of a transition forever and ever. It's a period that is time limited to deliver the implementation.
The problem is that Labour's policy, though, Caroline, if you don't really have the no-deal option, then it is a sort of case of going to the estate agent and saying, I'll buy that house at any price.
No, there's lots of different forms of leverage in this discussion. discussion, it seems to me, because there's trade both ways, there's security issues, defence issues, there's the rights of EU nationals, the rights of Brits living in other parts of the EU. There's lots of leverage. It's about a reality that we had a vote to leave the European Union. There has to be a deal. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be challenging, but there will have to be a deal. So I think the talk of no deal is not helpful. And just one thing, Joe, on things like the borders and our ports. I think Theresa May was a terrible Home Secretary because actually she didn't give enough attention to the infrastructure we needed at our borders and at our ports to ensure that we were secure as a country. And I think she failed on that. Money going into that should be happening regardless of whatever happens with the European Union.
Let's talk about Labour's position. Emily Thornberry yesterday was asked about free movement of people yesterday beyond March 2019. Does it end under Labour's policy once we leave the EU?
Yes.
Completely, because she actually said she was going to have a look at free movement. It did need to be dealt with. What does that mean?
I think free movement has to change. In terms of my own...
To change?
To change, yes. In terms of my own constituents, for example, when I've asked them about the areas of their concern, they have shown to me and said they're not that concerned about where there are skill shortages, highly specialised skills, but they are worried in certain sectors for the low skill, low pay. Now, I think what the people want is not an end to migration from the European Union, but they want to be able to turn the tap on and turn it off when they so choose. And Labour has said very clearly, and Jeremy Corbyn, there will have to be changes to freedom movement, so it cannot be the same as it currently is.
But changes is not the end.
No, because actually there will still be movement of workers from other parts of Europe into our country, just like there is movement from workers from other parts of the world outside the European Union. The question is what is the mechanism, what is the framework to allow that to happen? How will employers have to start justifying more why they're not training more people in both the public and private sector to meet this country's needs and asking themselves, why hasn't Britain got the workforce it needs? That does not exclude migration for work, but it's about having a different conversation.
But you hold a very sensible view on this. So that your party spokesman wants to remain in the single market, full member of the single market.
Who are you talking about?
Keir Starmer.
No, he
does. And Emily Thornberry was the same thing. There was a video yesterday doing the rounds on social media of the different positions that your leader has taken. You're sensible, and you're saying, actually, there are parameters here which we have to work
Well, let Caroline set out Labour's position on the single market. Does Labour believe the UK should stay in the single market all the way through, however long the transition period is?
Your official position.
Thank you. What Labour believes is actually we should make sure we have as much access to the single market when we leave the European Union, but during the transition period, which Theresa May has agreed to as well, we probably will stay in the same way we are today. Don't forget, Theresa May has also said that during that transition period, freedom of movement may continue as it currently is, but also we'll still be paying in. But the end game of this, Joe, and that's the important thing, is when we leave the European Union, we cannot be full members of the single market in the way we are now, because to be fair to our European cousins, how could they allow us to have our cake and eat it? So I agree with you that I've seen some of the vox poxes as well, and sometimes amongst my colleagues there's a different nuance in this. But the truth is that we will not be able to be full members of the of the single market and leave. And that is the case for many other countries that do trade.
But you're clearer than Keir Starmer.
No, Keir has said that as well. Keir made
He's hesitant on this.
No, Keir made it very... Nadhim, Keir made it very clear in his contribution in August. He said we'll have a new relationship both in regards to the single market and the customs union. Now, I have to say there are some people in my party who clearly do want to reverse the decision, and they take from that what maybe best suits them. But that's the position of the Labour Party.
Thank you. There you go. It's very clear, Nadhim. Now, if being talked about is the main currency in politics, then you should put